At the time of recording, it is September 11th, probably one of the most famous days in our modern history. For those of you who don't recall, it was a day that the two towers in New York City came down. For those of you old enough to have seen it, I am, we all saw it live on TV as we saw the towers fell. The upshot of what actually occurred on that day has had its ramifications go throughout the world for a very long time. It was the start of the surveillance state in America, the surveillance state which ultimately led to the Edward Snowden WikiLeaks. It was the start of a war in Afghanistan that ultimately, many years later, led to the withdrawal of American troops, leaving behind a large quantity of American arms, making Afghanistan a military superpower. It also sparked the initial Iraqi war, which would ultimately, many years later, lead to the creation of ISIS. You would think on a day like today, there would be so much to say as we reflect on these events in history. And yet that's not actually what's happened at all. I wake up this morning and I read the headlines and behold, not one mention of this. But you know what was mentioned? Rahman, again, for the millionth time. But anyway, before we get on to that, ladies and gentlemen, can I please remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Please, I'm asking you, please subscribe, help us on the journey to 100,000 subscribers. And if you really want to support me, you can buy me a coffee. That's a donation, guys, for those of you who don't know. The link is in the description box below. So very quickly, before we get on to the main news story, just to recap on some news you probably missed. So the first is actually from Martin van Staden. And he noticed that a relevant member of ActionSA started to become very pro-BEE and pro-excessive regulation, which basically means that they pro-racial quotas and market control. And as Martin says, turns on a dime. No, Martin, this is exactly what I was talking about. When the political party has no political positions of their own, it's very easy for those positions to shift in whatever way they think it best suits their interests. This was always a problem with ActionSA, and I've said it numerous times in videos recently. And as Seethler says, Big Daddy Liberty, ActionSA will inevitably lose votes. And interestingly enough, we can already see how the playbook's going to come out. And to quote Seethler, those racist whites ditched us because we wanted to serve blacks. Yeah, it's a pro-black rhetoric, as opposed to a pro-South African non-racial rhetoric, which is actually what ActionSA promised everybody that they would deliver, but now are not delivering because they're choosing to rather go populist. I don't know, make it make sense. Somebody let me know what you think in the comment section below. Finally, this is actually news from Afriforum. And you see, this news from Afriforum is actually quite telling. It's actually really important because you see what Afriforum are doing is they are sending legal letters to everybody who defames their organization. And everybody who gives a false or defamatory content, even online, if you do not remove those posts, they are taking you to court and they will sue you for libel. This is the correct approach to take. And you see why this becomes interesting is you can already see the consequences of it in real time. People are deleting their posts where they defame the organization. Now, before I go on to the main news story, I'm actually going to show you a clip from our favorite president of Argentina, Milei, and he had this to say.
Since the socialists came to power, they have been jailing people for posting on social media, and the journalists here would like that too because they don't like that they have lost the monopoly of the microphone and the ability to use that tool to extort and smear, to defame without any cause. Social media makes them accountable, and they don't like it. Stop searching. Ghosts, they're getting the same treatment they gave, but now people are doing it organically because they realized many of them are criminals.
So you see, why these clips become important is actually for us to go on to the main news story. And that is the news story. Yeah, it's about Rahman. Because Karen, one of the top news reporters at News 24, decided to write a hit piece against Rahman. And the hit piece was rather telling. You see, it was telling because it basically centered around two things. The first was a report done by a no-name organization that none of us have ever heard of. And the second was around a podcast that Rahman did with Gareth Cliff. The report came out months ago, like months and months and months ago. It was from an organization nobody ever heard of. And in this report, it basically highlighted the Kremlin's influence in South Africa through social media accounts. And the Morning Show handle was fingered in the report because, frankly, we get tagged in like everything out of the Russians, but specifically the Russian embassy in South Africa. Now, you might look at that and say, well, why was that the case? Well, at the start of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, we went and we did an interview with one of the Russian ambassador's staff. And we asked him during there, why did you have the invasion? That was it. We did a video on it. We posted online and off we went. And the only reason we did that is because at the time, everybody from the media industry was focusing on the Ukraine response. And we thought, well, it'd be nice to hear what the Russians have to say because nobody would give them a platform. So we did. That's it. That's all we did. Now, because of that, the Russians continually tagged us in some of their media press releases as if, like, we wanted to constantly be involved. And we never engaged with any of them. We never actually, took any of the social media posts seriously. And some think tank basically says, wow, that must mean that Monishot are paid agents of Russians. No, that's not the case at all. In fact, it would have been very nice for us to have actually got some money. But yeah, we never actually got it. So maybe if you can ask the Russians to send us the check, that'd be great. I'm being facetious, by the way. That's not a genuine statement. So then apparently they also noticed that we got invited to go to Rosatom. Now, for the record, both Roman and myself got invited to go. Roman went, I didn't really want to go. It's a bit far for me to travel. But Rosatom are not a Russian state-owned enterprise. They are a private company. And Rosatom do a lot of contracts in Africa as a whole. In fact, Rosatom right now are actually bidding for certain energy contracts in South Africa and many other parts in Africa. So it stands to reason that you would probably invite people who have an interest in Russian energy of any variety to go see their operations. And we weren't the only ones invited. Hugo was invited, Princess was invited, tons of people were invited. Roman just happened to be one of them. So apparently because he went over there, that must have been a paid gig. No, they pretty much paid for the flights and the hotel. Everything else was, sponsored out of your own pocket. And again, it was more just for the purposes of content. You go there, you record stuff, you listen to what people have to say, you create content around it. Now, to infer that means that you're a Russian paid spy, it's a bit of a leap. So even this report for us was something we never took seriously. To be frank, at the time, nobody else did. It came from some censor of behavioral change. Who the hell were these people? Like, nobody knew who they were. Now, the Gareth Cliff interview becomes very interesting because, you see, during that interview, Roman said a good number of his views, and those views apparently are all super, super controversial. Well, even if they are, I mean, they're his views. People are entitled to views. I mean, he's not there basically beating anybody over the head with his views. He's just saying what he thinks. But you see, what becomes interesting is that Gareth Cliff interview was done months ago. Months and months and months ago. So now Karen has taken two things that are completely unrelated, and she basically read an article about it. And it's pointless. Because this is now a exclusive to News 24. Wow, somebody tipped her off, except nobody tipped her off. These were both public knowledge for months and months and months in advance. Why didn't she do the articles when Roman first went on Gareth Cliff? And the answer is actually really easy to understand. You see, the answer is, well, he wasn't a person of interest at that point, was he? So he had no political power. And you may ask yourself, well, why didn't they write a big article about him when it was all the so-called, look how often we get tagged and the Russian stuff? Yeah, we don't care. Like, we never engaged with it. We never really even looked at it. And we don't actually use our Twitter handle that much. So you'd be at a real stretch for trying to link us to anything there. But, hey, what the hell? So why is all of that important? Well, you got to ask yourself, like, why are they doing this? And actually, it really becomes quite incredibleist to see. Because Roman hasn't actually been openly racist. In fact, he's a nationalist. And he supports Russian energy in South Africa because the Russians aren't worried about the green agenda. They're worried about actually having energy stability. And apparently that makes Roman a really bad guy because he's not worried about climate change. And maybe Roman thinks that climate change is a hoax. Maybe no, who knows? We don't really care. What we care about is actually economic growth, which actually is a policy position of the ANC. So arguably, Roman is actually closer to the ANC in that policy than anyone else. But you see, Roman gets trumped as some kind of outright conservative with views who are just, like really, really biased, bigoted. Why are they biased? Because he's a believing Catholic. As a believing Catholic, and as a practicing Catholic, he believes that marriage should be for the sanctity of man and woman, and the marriage should be for the procreation of children. This is a position taken by many Catholics around the world. Like, there's 1.6 billion Catholics. Like, there's a lot of them. Like, are you honestly saying that Roman's just alone? He's bigoted because he has those views. Technically, that's the actual view of the Vatican itself. So you're basically saying that he's bigoted because he's Catholic. Why do you say that? Because then at least we know where you are. Are you saying that he's bigoted because he believes in strong property rights and that the government shouldn't be allowed to interfere on those things? That he actually believes in the real principle of non-racialism to the point where he actually believes that Paddies should be allowed to be Paddies in their own distinct right, and Afrikaners should be allowed to be their own distinct people in their own right. Does that make him bigoted? Does that make him racist? Because he doesn't believe in a homogeneous blob of a society where everything becomes grey and we all just sit there and sing kumbaya together with no real identity of our own. Does that make him deeply problematic? Because many would argue that doesn't. In fact, if you actually ask many of the tribal leaders, that's exactly what they'd promote. So Ramon would be closer to a tribal leader than these people are, which in itself becomes really, really interesting, you see, because Ramon believes in monarch. In case we've forgotten, we've got monarchs in South Africa. There are a number of kings. There are a number of tribal leaders. They are protected by the Constitution. So Ramon's basically being constitutional by supporting them. Right. But the liberals don't believe that because, me democracy. But then apparently Ramon doesn't like NGOs because you see what tends to happen in South Africa and many other countries around the world is that the NGOs create reports that are self-referential. A good example is the NGO of the Institute of Security Studies, who always has something to say about gun violence in South Africa. And then the very newspapers like News 24, whenever they want something to also support gun violence in South Africa and why we should have no guns, they seem to refer to themselves. So they create the study, and then they use the study to justify their positions. I mean, I did a video on this. This is what we'd call political activism. This isn't journalism, it's political activism. And so what you tend to see with a lot of the NGOs is that they generally push a policy position that is not often in the national interest of the country as a whole. This is factual. We see it right up and down Africa. We see it all over the world. There are numerous countries that have banned NGOs, not just Russia, not just China or wherever else. There are numerous countries. These things exist all over the world. Why don't you go to the Arabs and ask them why they don't allow George Soros into their place? I mean, does that make them racist? Does that make them bigoted? Are you willing to say that online? Are you willing to call Saudi Arabia bigoted? I mean, I dare you. So you got to ask yourself a question. What's really going on here? And you see, what we can actually do is we can learn from this. And what we can learn is that on a day like today, September the 11th, the day, possibly one of the most important days in modern history, we should be talking about 9/11. This is the day where the Bella Bill possibly could go to Parliament and get signed. This is the day where Fikile Mbalula is telling the SACP to go do one because they're just causing too many problems. They can't talk for the ANC. They potentially should go out there on their own. This is the day Fikile Mbalula says, the ANC is not communist. We're socially democrat. The SACP are communist. If you want to pursue that, you should do it. These are all worthy headlines. Every single one of them. But we're talking about an exclusive Ramon cabinet. Ooh, scary. Because Ramon has opinions. So what's actually going on here? Let's really think about this. What's going on? And the answer is actually very easy to understand. The media wants to show you something. The media has exclusive domain over truth claims. Ramon also has his own opinions on truth claims. But now, Icarus has flown too close to the sun. What they want to do is they want to show Ramon he's not untouchable. He might be in a position of power. And maybe he even clawed there. But where he is, he's not untouchable. Because the media will sacrifice him to exert their authority over him. This is what CRT does. You're not allowed to question the narrative of critical race theory. Because if you do, that means you're racist. And the word racist is used as a hammer to nail you down, to make sure you submit to the mob. And so what's happening here is the mob is coming for Ramon. The question is the qualifications, the question is views, the question is integrity. This is all designed to create pressure on John. And the pressure is for John to fire Ramon. Even though Ramon has a contract of employment with the state, he's not a DA party member. He's a state employee. So you see, if John fires him, he's going to fire him on what grounds? The fact that Ramon has views? And everyone has views. Is it that Ramon's not qualified enough? Well, last time I checked, Ramon has an LLB in law. It has been alleged to me that potentially there are some senior members of the cabinet whose chief of staffs don't even have a matric. How come they're not on the news? How come nobody's talking about them? Well, the answer is because they didn't have views. They didn't challenge the media. Remember Ramon's favorite catchline, you don't hate the media enough. And in this instance, you don't. Because you see, the media has been challenged. The media has been shown to bleed. And in return, the media is going to make Ramon bleed so that they can show them the narrative that the media sets must go on. And the problem is, once you see in the eyes of the beast, you see what's going on. You understand how it works. Create a report. Get it done by some BS organization. Sit in it for a little while. Use it at a later stage to crush your opponents. And one has to ask the question, how often has this been done? How often has the news about Jacob Zuma, has it been fabricated? How often has the news around Fikile Mbalula, how often has that been fabricated? We've got news stories right now with the Justice Minister. Karen's done her own exclusive breaking news around the Justice Minister. Can we trust that news? Is it unbiased? Or is it nothing more than hit pieces sponsored by players of unknown origin? We're told by Karen at News 24 that apparently there are insiders in the DA that just don't like Ramon. They feel really unsettled. And so what? The DA has how many party members? So what? Or senior members. So are you suggesting that there's basically a power play in the DA? Power plays for position. Does that never happen in MK, EFF, ANC? I mean, come on. That's politics. That's how it works. Why would you take that so seriously? People are concerned. We are concerned. So what? Concerned to what degree? What's actually concerning these people? They're concerned because Ramon told everybody, you don't trust the media. Media lies. He made the media bleed. He had views that were alternative to theirs. And as a result, they feel the need to cut him while he's weak. They feel he's weak. And to some degrees, Ramon must feel he's weak himself. Because he issued a rebuttal on X, basically saying, some of my views in the past were controversial, but the landscape in South Africa has changed. And I've changed too. So I'm trying to do what I can to benefit the country. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a story about Ramon. It's a story about the media. Because once you understand how it works, and you see how it goes, one of the comments that they make, oh, Ramon is against the Firearms Control Bill. Yes, he is, because he feels that every individual should have the right to self-determine what defense is. Self-defense for me, I am my own first responder. We live in a very dangerous country. Not being able to have self-defense, not being able to protect your own life or your family's life, it's a mistake. It would mean that you yourself would be vulnerable to attack in a country where an attack is very likely to occur. So why would you be anti-firearm? But you see, these individuals aren't that. They're not people that want your freedom. They want your control. They want your submission. So they will report some BS bullshit study that was done by some NGO that had an axe to grind that wants a whole world to be disarmed because they decided that that was the agenda they wanted to follow. So what they do is they reference themselves. Self-referential. The same people work with the media. The media work with the same people constantly to create a narrative and a story. And Ramon knew that. And he could see behind the veil. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see behind the veil. Because of that, Ramon needs to bleed. And Ramon needs to be sacrificed above all else. We need to sacrifice him to show who's in charge. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I have nothing further to add. I suppose the only thing I would say is I'd leave you with a meme. For those of you who don't know, apparently Ohio has problems at the moment. So basically, they've got a lot of Haitians in there, and the allegation is going around that apparently some of these Haitians are eating cats and ducks. So as a result, this new political campaign has been spearheaded to protect the cats and the ducks. The memes, at least, are very funny. The truth behind it, I don't know, I don't live in Ohio. But I'm also reminded of this TV advert from the 1980s, and everything was funny. Life's not funny anymore. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, see you soon.
Hey, you guys realize this black cat peanut butter is crowded with protein, and that's what builds your physique. No kidding, huh? Hey, you kick sand in my face. Just beat it, kid. Hi, dog. Oh, yeah.
Black cat peanut butter works wonders with a slice of bread. Even miracles.
I thought I told you to scram. Hey, what the?
Charlie.
Black dog, huh? Black cat.